The night is quiet now, but you can still hear it. The subtle unrest beneath your calm exterior. The tiny tremor inside the mind. The soft throb of something unnamed, yet always present. It rises when the world goes silent. It whispers when no one else is speaking. It lingers even when everything looks fine from the outside. And you wonder, why? Why is there always something tugging at you? Why does it feel as though a part of you is clenched, even when your hands are open? Why does your chest tighten even in moments that should feel peaceful? You don't know when it began. You only know it never truly stopped. Some nights, you lie awake and watch the ceiling blur into shadow. Some mornings, you wake with that familiar heaviness, not a weight, but a presence. En invisible présence. Anxiety without a name. And you ask yourself the question you never quite say aloud. Why am I always carrying something? A tension, a fear, a pressure to hold everything together. As if the world might break if you exhale too deeply. You've looked for the cause. You've searched for the memory, the mistake, the trauma, the event. But what haunts you feels older than any moment you can recall. It feels inherited, passed down, like a story you were told before you even had language. Perhaps you never questioned why you were always striving, why you needed things to go a certain way, why you were terrified not of failure but of letting go of the image, letting go of the plan, letting go of the version of yourself you thought you had to be. You've been taught, again and again, to build, to pursue, to achieve, to control. But no one told you that control has a cost that lives inside the chest, a cost that stirs at night. Anxiety is not just fear, it is the tension of a person who believes the world rests upon their shoulders. And so tonight, as the quiet deepens and your breath slows, another question enters. What if the weight I am carrying isn't mine? What if it never was? What if you were holding on to expectations that belong to other people? Standards that were never yours? Dreams that were handed to you like heirlooms, polished by generations of urgency? What if your striving is inherited? What if your anxiety is a kind of legacy? What if renunciation, the thing you've avoided, is the real inheritance you've been searching for? But you don't know that yet. Right now, there is only the tremor, only the quiet unrest, only the faint sense that something inside you wants to surrender, but doesn't know how. You know this unease well. It appears even when life is going well. Especially then, you achieve something and the mind rolls forward to the next thing. You fix one problem and another rises from the shadows. You rest, and rest becomes its own new source of guilt. You ask yourself why you can't simply be, why you're always reaching, grabbing, chasing, clinging. And beneath that question lies a deeper one, the one you avoid. What am I afraid will happen if I loosen my grip? You imagine collapse. You imagine loss. You imagine everything falling apart the moment you stop holding it together. So you do what everyone else does. You keep tightening. You keep running. You keep believing that anxiety is something to manage, not something to understand. You think, perhaps, that you were born this way, with a restless mind, with a heart that beats too loudly, with a world inside you that feels slightly tilted. You never consider that the world outside you taught you to fear letting go. You never consider that anxiety might not be a flaw, but a signal that you've been carrying something unnatural, something too heavy for any one person to bear. You never consider that the antidote to anxiety might not be strength, but surrender, a different kind of strength, a quieter strength, one that comes not from holding on, but from releasing. You've heard the word renunciation before. It sounded like retreat, like resignation, like giving up. You had no idea it might be the opposite. You had no idea it might feel like coming home. But the mind resists this. It always resists what it doesn't understand. And so, it keeps asking, what do I lose if I stop trying to control everything? But it never asks, what do I gain? Tonight, the darkness has softened just enough for that question to surface. Tonight, something in you is willing to look inward, not with fear, but with curiosity. Tonight, a new possibility begins to form, like a faint light beyond the horizon. What if letting go is not the end of effort, but the end of unnecessary suffering? You feel the question settle into your bones. It doesn't demand an answer. It simply lingers. Persistent, gentle, true. Your breath deepens. Your shoulders sink. A small, delicate stillness begins to form within you. You may not know the path, but you feel its presence. The journey begins here, in the silent space between your heartbeat and your breath. In the moment when the mind admits, I cannot carry all this anymore, and something older than thought whispers back, you were never meant to. The truth doesn't reveal itself all at once. It arrives in fragments, in moments, in the quiet recognition of patterns you've lived with for years without ever naming. You begin to notice how often you reach for something, anything, to fill the restlessness. A plan, a distraction, a future to chase, a past to fix. You call these things goals, responsibilities, ambitions. But beneath them lies a subtler truth. You are afraid of the emptiness that appears when everything becomes still. You fill your schedule so you don't have to hear the silence. You fill your mind so you don't have to meet yourself. You fill your life with motion because stillness feels like a mirror, one that reflects too clearly. And yet, even with all the movement, the tension remains. Anxiety thrives in motion. It grows in the chase. It hides behind the illusion of progress. You tell yourself you're building a life, but a part of you suspects you're running from one. You push forward because silence feels like a threat, because the mind whispers, if you stop, everything you've built will fall apart. If you slow down, you'll lose your place. If you rest, you'll be overtaken. This is the voice of the inherited burden, ancient, instinctive, unquestioned. You thought you wanted freedom. What you wanted was control, because control felt like safety, because control felt like certainty, because control felt like the only way to outrun the chaos you feared lived underneath everything. But the more you grasp, the more the world slips through your fingers. The more you tighten, the more fragile everything becomes. The more you cling, the more exhausted you feel. You thought you were living. You were only running. Running from the feeling of not being enough. Running from the fear that life is bigger than your plans. Running from the truth that perfection is a prison with walls you built yourself. Every desire becomes a direction. Every fear becomes a map. Every expectation becomes a weight. And so the cycle repeats. You crave something, you chase it, you get it or you don't, and either way the restlessness returns. The hunger never ends, because the hunger is not for the thing you're chasing, it is for the relief you believe it will bring. The new job, the approval, the relationship, the success, the image of who you could become someday. You think these things will quiet the storm inside you, but longing only creates more longing. The storm feeds itself. Désir promise freedom, but each promise becomes a chain. A golden one, perhaps, but still a chain. You've lived long enough to see the pattern. The moment you acquire what you want, the mind becomes thirsty again, like a traveler drinking salt water. It looks like satisfaction. It feels like surrender, but it dries you from the inside. And you begin to wonder, why is nothing ever enough? Why does peace vanish the moment I reach for it? Why does every solution become a new source of pressure? The mind believes it is searching for fulfillment, but in truth, it is searching for escape. Escape from the insecurity born of believing you must manage everything. Escape from the fear that life might unfold without your permission. Escape from the possibility that things could go wrong or right without your control. So you hold, you grip, you manage, you strategize, you overthink, you anticipate disasters that never come. You rehearse conversations that never happen. You prepare for outcomes that never arrive. You spend your days trying to prevent the uncertainty that life is made of. And the cost is your peace. Not because life is dangerous, but because the mind refuses to let it be what it is. You notice how this habit extends to every corner of your existence. You can't relax until everything is done, but everything is never done. You can't rest until the future feels safe, but the future is never certain. You can't breathe until the world agrees with your expectations, but the world is indifferent to expectations. And so you remain suspended halfway between effort and exhaustion, unable to stop, unable to fully live. You have been taught that to let go is to withdraw from life. But look closely, see clearly. Your anxiety comes not from life itself. It comes from the belief that you must control the way life unfolds. This belief is the root of the cycle. This belief is the inheritance that weighs on you. This belief is the story passed down, generation to generation. Like a family heirloom you never asked to receive. You inherited the belief that freedom must be earned, that happiness must be achieved, that safety must be secured, that life must be controlled. But what if all these years you've been trying to complete a task that was never meant to be yours? What if renunciation is not the loss of life, but the loss of unnecessary suffering? What if the things you cling to are not anchors, but chains? What if the things you fear letting go of are not supports, but burdens? What if the control you fight for is the very force suffocating your peace? You feel the truth of it somewhere deep in your chest. A pressure you've carried for so long it became invisible. A habit so familiar you've mistaken it for you. But the truth stands quietly, waiting for recognition. You cannot calm the ocean by gripping the waves. You cannot soften the wind by closing your fists. You cannot silence life by shouting orders at it. You can only exhaust yourself trying. And yet, you keep trying. Because you believe the alternative is collapse. But here is the revelation that slowly rises, like dawn breaking through a sleepless night. Collapse does not come from letting go. Collapse comes from holding on too tightly. You have mistaken effort for strength. You have mistaken tension for discipline. You have mistaken anxiety for awareness. Control has become your default, your shield, your identity. But it has also become your prison. You never learned that there is a freedom far deeper than mastery, a freedom born of acceptance, of surrender, of release. Renunciation is not rejection. It is not apathy. It is not escape. Renunciation is simply the refusal to carry what was never yours. The expectations, the pressures, the inherited fears, the illusion that you must hold the universe together with your bare hands. You begin to see the pattern more clearly now. The cycle of clinging, the cycle of striving, the cycle of fear disguised as ambition. And in this clarity, a new question rises. If I stop carrying everything, what remains? The answer does not arrive yet. It waits in the deep silence, ahead in the place you've always avoided. But a shift has begun. A soft, subtle loosening in the grip you've held for so long. You are not free yet, but you are beginning to see the walls of your cage. And that is the first moment of liberation. The mind has argued long enough. It has rehearsed the past, predicted the future, justified the tension, defended the fear. Now something quieter begins. Not understanding, not logic, not clarity. Something deeper, something older than thought. A slow descent inward, as if you are walking into a cathedral built inside your own chest. The walls are made of silence. The floor is made of breath. The ceiling stretches beyond what the eye can see. You move slowly now. You speak less, even inside your own mind. Words feel too heavy, too sharp, too loud. Awareness becomes softer. The voice inside your head loses its urgency. Your thoughts begin to unwind, like threads released from a tight fist. This is the space you've avoided for years, not because it is frightening, but because it is unfamiliar. The silence is vast. The stillness is wide enough to drown in. Yet you are not drowning, you are finally floating. Beneath the noise of your life, beneath the layers of expectation and fear, there is a quiet that has been waiting for you. Not demanding, not insisting, simply waiting. You enter it like a diver, slipping beneath the waves slowly, deliberately, breath by breath. The world above becomes muffled. The surface becomes distant, and you begin to sense something subtle. Anxiety does not exist in stillness. It exists in resistance to stillness. The mind panics when it has nothing to hold. But the heart remembers how to rest. You feel the difference now. Thoughts move like clouds drifting through twilight. They come, they go, they dissolve. You don't chase them. You don't judge them. You don't shape them. You simply notice. You begin to recognize the force beneath all your striving, not ambition, not desire, not purpose. Fear. Fear of not being enough. fear of losing control, fear of being seen as ordinary, fear of disappointing the shadows of the past. And in this soft, fragile moment, you see the truth. Almost everything you carried, every burden, every pressure, every expectation was built from fear, not your fear. Fear inherited, fear taught, fear disguised as responsibility. The mind learned to brace itself because it believed life was something to withstand, not something to inhabit. But here, in the quiet, nothing demands your strength, nothing threatens your worth, nothing whispers that you must do more, be more, achieve more. For the first time in a long time, you are simply here, not preparing, not controlling, not protecting, just breathing. The descent reveals something you never saw clearly before. You were never anxious because life was overwhelming. You were anxious because you believed you had to stand between life and yourself like a shield. You believed you had to monitor every possibility. You believed you had to perfect every moment. You believed you had to hold the world up with your own two hands. But as the silence deepens, a new realization flickers like candlelight. You have been fighting a storm that ended years ago. The memory of it remained. The fear of it remained. The posture of bracing remained. But the storm itself, it passed, and yet you kept living as though you needed to outrun it. The descent shows you this with painful clarity. You don't need to brace anymore. You don't need to clench. You don't need to anticipate threats that no longer exist. You can release the posture of survival. And when you do, a small, trembling relief ripples through you. Your shoulders sink. Your breath opens. A warmth spreads through your chest, subtle as dawn. You realize you've spent years trying to be invulnerable, but invulnerability was never the source of peace. Peace comes from something else, something much simpler. Peace comes from allowing yourself to be human, to be imperfect, to be uncertain, to be fragile, to be alive. You have been running from fragility your entire life, but fragility is not the enemy. Fragility is the doorway to presence. You cannot feel fully alive unless you are willing to be touched by life. And life touches you only when you stop armoring yourself against it. You breathe again, this time deeper, this time softer. You renounce not as a monk stepping away from the world, but as a soul stepping back into reality. You relinquish the weight of control. You relinquish the pressure of perfection. You relinquish the fear of letting things unfold on their own. And in that surrender, something unexpected happens. You begin to trust life again, not because it promises comfort, not because it guarantees safety, but because you realize you were never meant to fight it. You soften, you exhale, you feel the earth beneath you steady, silent, reliable, and the mind, which has spent years tightening itself around the world, finally loosens its grip, not because you forced it, because you stopped feeding the fear that commanded it. Stillness is reclaiming you, breath by breath. You are descending into a space that has no urgency, no demands, no expectations. A space where the world does not need you to hold it together. A space where the only thing required of you is presence. You touch the deepest truth you have forgotten. You are not the keeper of the world. You are part of it. You are not the architect of fate. You are a witness of its unfolding. You are not the protector of every outcome. You are the one who experiences them. And when this truth settles in, gently, slowly, lovingly, the tension inside you melts like snow under the first light of spring. You feel lighter, not because the world has changed, but because the weight inside you is dissolving. You have descended into yourself and found no monster, no disaster, no darkness waiting to consume you. Only quiet, only breath, only awareness, only a self that has wanted for so long to stop fighting. The descent is not an ending. It is the beginning of a deeper freedom. A freedom that comes when you finally meet the truth without fear. A freedom that whispers, you don't need to carry everything. You never did. Something subtle shifts as you rise from the silence within. It is not dramatic. It is not triumphant. It is not a revelation that arrives with lightning or epiphany. It is softer than that, more honest, more human. A quiet understanding begins to bloom, not in the mind, but in the space beneath it. the place where awareness lives without words. You feel it first in the breath, a sense of ease, a sense of spaciousness that was always there but buried beneath years of tension. You inhale and nothing resists. You exhale and nothing clings. It feels unfamiliar. It feels like coming home. The world around you hasn't changed. There is still uncertainty. There are still responsibilities. There are still unanswered questions. But something has changed within you. The storm is still outside, but the storm is no longer inside. This is liberation. Not the liberation you imagine, the kind that fixes every problem, wipes away every fear, grants you unshakable confidence. This liberation is quieter, gentler, more real. It is the liberation of no longer needing life to obey your plans. It is the liberation of no longer arguing with what already is. It is the liberation of releasing the illusion that you are incomplete. You begin to notice how light everything feels when you stop gripping the world with clenched fists. You begin to see that the things you were terrified of losing were not sources of peace, they were obstacles to it. Not because they were wrong, but because you held them with fear instead of love. Renunciation is not about walking away. It is about loosening your grip. It is about letting things be without forcing them to become something else. It is about realizing that nothing in life was ever yours to possess, only yours to experience. And that realization brings relief deeper than any reassurance the mind could offer. You feel as though you have stepped out of a battle you didn't know you were fighting. Your exhaustion makes sense now. Your tension makes sense. Your anxiety makes sense. You were at war with life, at war with uncertainty, at war with imperfection, at war with yourself. But what happens when you stop fighting? Not because you give up, but because you wake up, you see clearly that the world is not attacking you. Life is not testing you. Existence is not demanding anything from you. The pressure was internal, self-made, inherited, sustained. And now, without that pressure, something miraculous appears. Space. Space to breathe. Space to feel. Space to live without the constant hum of urgency. You notice the softness of the moment, the simplicity of presence, the warmth in your chest that no achievement ever gave you. You begin to understand a truth that sages whispered across centuries. Freedom isn't something you gain, it's something you stop resisting. You see how futile the struggle for perfect control has been, like trying to hold a wave in place, like trying to stop the wind with your hands, like trying to freeze time. Control was always an illusion, but surrender is an awakening. You aren't surrendering to a force outside you, you're surrendering to the truth within you, and that truth is simple. You don't need to earn worth, you don't need to justify existence, you don't need to outperform your fears. You only need to be here, fully, gently, completely. Awareness becomes your anchor, breath becomes your refuge, presence becomes your inheritance. The burden you carried dissolves not because life removes it, but because you stop claiming it as yours. You renounce the voice that told you needed to be more. You renounce the pressure that told you peace must be earned. You renounce the illusion that you must carry the world to be worthy of it. And in the space that opens when those illusions fall away, a different voice emerges. Not loud, not assertive, barely above a whisper, a voice you had forgotten, yet somehow always recognized. You are enough as you are. The words echo through you, like a bell struck in an empty temple. Clear, pure, undeniable. You realize this is the inheritance you were meant to receive, not the anxiety passed down through generations, not the fear wrapped in ambition, but the quiet knowledge that you are allowed to rest. You are allowed to release. You are allowed to trust. You are allowed to simply be. The liberation deepens. Your mind wanders for a moment toward the future, toward uncertainty, possibility, unpredictability. The old anxiety flickers, a faint spark of the pattern you once lived inside. But it fades almost instantly, not because you suppress it, but because there is nothing for it to attach to anymore. Where it once found a wall of tension, it now meets only space. Where it once found a clenched heart, it now finds openness. Where it once found a desperate need for control, it now finds ease. you realize liberation is not a final state. It is a way of moving through the world, a way of relating to life without clinging to it, a way of seeing that nothing needs to be held tightly to be meaningful. You begin to walk differently, not literally, but in the inner way your presence moves through the landscape of your own mind. You walk with less fear, with less urgency, with less need to defend or define yourself. You walk with more softness, more patience, more trust. You walk knowing that life does not need your control. It only needs your participation. And in this gentle acceptance, peace becomes less of a goal and more of a companion. The anxiety that once felt like a constant drumbeat becomes a distant echo, not gone, but no longer gripping you, no longer defining you, no longer owning you. You see now that liberation is not the absence of fear. It is the absence of identification with fear. You can feel it, but it does not become you. You can notice it, but you don't follow it. You can hear its whisper, but you no longer mistake it for truth. This is the quiet revolution, the subtle shift in the center of your being, the arising of a different kind of strength, not the strength to hold on, but the strength to let go. And so, as the final breath of this journey settles within you, as the silence opens into spaciousness, as awareness fills the room like soft dawn light, you understand what all the noise kept you from seeing. There was never anything to fix, only things to release. There was never anything to prove, only things to remember. There was never anything to chase, only truths to stop running from. And in this stillness, pure, unforced, undeniable, freedom finds you, not because you sought it, but because you finally stopped seeking everything else. You sit in the gentle quiet, no urgency, no weight, no fear of what comes next, just breath, just presence, just awareness. And the paradox that ends every true awakening unfolds within you like a final note held in the vastness of a cathedral. When you stop seeking peace, it finds you.